My name's Trent Fierro. I'm with Aruba Networks, now HP Enterprise as of November 1st. So thank you for coming. Obviously the topic is about BYOD and some of the things that people that understand about BYOD and some of the things that people sort of neglect to think about, right? So if you look at the agenda today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the trends that are happening. I do a lot of presentations with customers that come into our executive briefing center. So I get to talk to people that are concerned with, BYOD, management aspects as well. So how does an IT person designate, who can bring a BYOD device into the office, who can onboard it, when they can onboard it, how many devices they can onboard, and then what they can actually get to. So we'll talk a little bit about that, the devices themselves and the fact that people continuously lose them, they're stolen, they belong to us, right? So theoretically, we can download anything we want on these devices, applications that could be secure and some that aren't. I have a guitar tuner on here that God knows who made it, but it was free. So I downloaded it, right? And it's probably something I shouldn't use on the corporate network, but not that I do, but I have it on my computer or I have it on my phone. And then there's issues around anything that you bring into the environment now. And the fact that most of you work at the office and then you work at home, right? How many people work at home? Most everybody, right? And then these devices, how many people have iPhones? Well, pretty, 3/4. How about Samsung devices? It's usually the next big thing, right? And then everything else drops off. Anybody have a BlackBerry? No Canadians in the room. So that's pretty typical, but usually somebody raises their hand, they got a BlackBerry. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you can authenticate any device, right? But there are some services that with BlackBerry you're not going to be able to use, like an onboarding service, because they have a closed-in API. How about Windows phones? Anybody? One brave soul. That's pretty typical too, but it's usually one or two. So they don't have an API either. So any onboarding, if you're an IT person, you have to have and expect him to come to you and you manually go and onboard his device, which you have to go change the settings for .1x. You have to create and change the SSID, et cetera. So any kind of authentication on the back end, though, theoretically you want the same policy management system to be able to authenticate that device, which does work. And then we're going to talk about something that we're calling adaptive trust defense. And the idea there is that if you do something like a policy management server, it solves one problem. Is anybody using MDM on their devices? 1, 2, 5, 7, maybe a third of you. The idea there is that when I talk to people, they think that solving BYOD is going and talking to MobileIron, AirWatch, Citrix, a variety of other vendors, and that solves the BYOD problem. It solves, again, one component. So it's going to take multiple security solutions in order to help you solve the BYOD problem. And the fact that everybody is mobile and you have different roles within your companies. I'm in marketing, he's in sales. I don't need to see the information that he sees, and he doesn't need to see the information that I see. He has a different work style than I do. He's always on the road. I'm on the road occasionally. So it's amazing that you'll get people into our office. They're traveling a lot, and they basically say that IT will not give them the same access when they're on the road as when they're in the office. And I'm like, not even with the VPN service that they automate. No, they don't believe in the fact that I should have access to information on the intranet. It doesn't make sense today, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about policy management and its role, and hopefully there's a little time for Q&A. So today's trends start, if you look at I'm looking at it from the left-hand side, I guess it's your left as well. The idea is that BYOD is sort of scaring everybody from top down. If you talk to the executives, they're afraid of what BYOD means. People can bring their own devices. People have different types of devices. Does the IT team need to manage each and every one of them? Does the help desk need to understand how each and every one of them work? And the fact that it's mobile, you're taking it home, you're bringing it into the office, You basically take your laptop and you might set it down on your desk, and then you walk away. You go and you take your phone and you go to a meeting that's in a conference room, or you take it in a cafeteria, and your laptop sits on your desk. So because you now have BYOD and you're moving, what happens to that device that sits on the desk? If somebody comes up to your laptop and starts typing, is there an acknowledgement that you get while you're away from your laptop that lets you know that somebody's typing on your laptop? Two-factor authentication. Is anybody using two-factor authentication for network access as well as application access? One guy said yes, two said yes on network. How about the application piece? Like a Duo, something like that? Ping or an Okta? Those are other considerations that people don't think about. So in this room, maybe, 5% of you have thought about the fact that what happens when I'm mobile and I'm trying to reach applications when I'm in the office or out of the office, and maybe it's a designated cloud app. Do I require somebody to go and authenticate or authorize the fact that somebody is going to those applications? Something that you need to consider as well. And then the apps themselves, the fact that you can go to a generic app store and download any app that you want. Are you allowed to bring that onto the enterprise network? Gaming apps. Anybody doing betting apps on their smartphone? Nobody? It's rare. There are other apps as well that when I ask people do raise their hands, and it's the fact that they can't do it, it's their personal device, right? If you're watching football right now, every commercial is almost about you being part of the game, right? And you betting. So a lot of those apps, though, who builds them, God knows. Does anybody know how many apps there are of Angry Birds? How many versions of Angry Birds? Take a guess. More than, almost 20. And I heard that there's maybe one that isn't unsecure. So anybody that's using stuff like that, because they're letting their kids put it on their phone, and then they're walking into your environment with it. It's basically an open app that has possibly malware in it. But people don't think about that because it's just BYOD. And you're not going to have somebody like download an app, bring it into your enterprise because they're smart users, right? They're savvy, we're adults, theoretically, right? So those kind of issues you have to consider as well, and you have to figure out how to manage, but you have to figure out how to manage without you being in the middle of it all. So you need to look at automated tools. Device loss and data. People lose a device every day, constantly. So you leave them in hotels, you leave them in airports, you leave them in taxis. They're stolen on a continuous basis. I live in the Bay Area, and it's not uncommon to hear that somebody was on a bus, somebody took somebody's smartphone. That data alone means that your enterprise information is open to everybody. How many people use a PIN code? A lot of people aren't raising their hands. In our industry, you should have a PIN code on your phone. I'm going to say something, hope the ladies don't get mad, but guess who's the worst at not having a PIN code? Ladies. And you know the reason why they don't like PIN codes? Because it dirties the screen. Right? Who wants makeup on their face when they just took it off their face? So there are ways, and there are things that you could do, but you have to think about it, right? It's my job to think about this weird stuff, but the idea is that a PIN code, you can use an MDM tool in conjunction with the access piece that lets you connect to a network in order to ensure that the user is sort of doing the right thing, and then you're doing the right thing to let people onto your network. And then malware and APTs, the whole thing is the fact that the bad people are getting smarter. They realize that us as users are not the most secure. We're not thinking along the lines of, the company line all the time. We're thinking about ourselves most of the time. So we'll do things like go to an airport, connect to the open and free Wi-Fi network, and not turn on a VPN. So they're looking for things that we're doing that we're just not aware of. So you have to deal with that as well. Again, what do you want to do? You want to make sure that, again, you're using automation, you're using firewalls, you're using IPS tools, and the IPS tools you're hoping to make smarter because they understand that things are evolving as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then the guest Wi-Fi piece I've touched on, they're usually open networks. Why are they open networks? Because they don't want you to have to take, and for the 25 minutes that you're on a network, configure your device for .1x. It doesn't make any sense. So you, as smart IT people, have to like figure out how to make me smarter without asking me to do anything. You're going to automate how a VPN gets started, and you're not going to base it all on me initiating a client. It could be me initiating an application and then automatically building a VPN. So we'll talk about ways that you can do that as well. The endpoint dilemma, I'm a little older than some of you, but the idea was that you were issued a laptop and IT did everything for you. They took a golden config, they handed you a laptop, all you had to do was log in. All the applications you were supposed to use were already there. All the VPN infrastructure was already there. All the settings were already built for you, but it doesn't work like that anymore. You go to the store, you buy your own device, you go to the store again, you buy an iPad. I got a customer who's in the same store in New York City as the Apple store. They're a financial organization. They don't allow, or they did not allow Wi-Fi. Just use it for personal devices too. But create a policy that sends me to the internet if that's all you want. And then you can throttle what I'm doing on the internet because you can set QoS levels, you can set bandwidth levels for what I'm doing with this versus this. I'm not sure if everybody understands that, but the idea is that you don't want to create SSIDs like in the past you would for VLANs. Anybody use Cisco Wi-Fi? How about Cisco wired? I'm surprised, I thought more. I worked at Cisco for 12 years. And when you wanted to deploy something new, you said, hey, just build a new VLAN, right? And then you route between it because we sold routers. It made a lot of sense. But now what you want to do is you want to be able to go, this device does 3 different things, right? It's a voice tool, it's a data tool, it's a video tool. What VLAN do you put it in? The better idea is to hold it in a holding pattern based on the fact that once I initiate a video application, then that traffic goes down a video VLAN. So there are things to consider that are outside of just put everything into a new SSID as well. So the idea is that I connect to the same SSID with both tools, and they can differentiate what I get to with this device versus this device, and they can give me different quality of service for both devices as well. But the idea is you have to know what devices those are. You can't rely on old AAA components to go, oh, I see Trent connected to the network, because they don't really know that. All it knows is that somebody connected and I gave them an IP address. In today's world, what you want to do is you want to go, person connected, and he connected with a smartphone, and then he connected with a laptop, and then he connected with a game console, and then he connected with an iPad or some kind of other tablet. It goes on, especially if you're in university and you want to know how to differentiate between a smartphone and something else. You need to profile those devices. The user behavior I touched upon before. We're our worst enemy, right? How many people have lost a mobile device within the last 2 years? 1. We're good. You guys are really good. Typically, more hands are up in the air. And it's just the fact that it happens, right? I was going through the airport the other day and I left it on a chair and some kid actually ran up to me and said, hey, is this your phone? Yes, thank you. So Phoenix Airport, people are nice. The idea is that when you lose that phone, did you have a PIN code on it? Maybe, maybe not. What's the first thing you do when you find a smartphone? You try it, right? And if you can log in, what do you look at first? That's usually third. It's usually, oh, I'm going to check out the pictures. Could be good, it could be really bad. So I'm going to suggest, again, the PIN code. PIN codes are going to go away, though, because I'm on an older phone, but nowadays you're going to use, fingerprint or thumbprint on a phone. Samsung actually got smart and put it on the back. But PIN codes may go away. We're going to this two-factor thing where that, again, could be considered one part of your two-factor. It's your AD credential, it's your certificate, or it's your thumbprint, or your fingerprint. In schools, kids are going to basically not use PIN codes. They're going to use like visuals. You're going to see like pick monkey, gorilla, elephant, and that's your login authentication code at a school, because they don't use an Active Directory. They don't want kids to remember lengthy passwords. They don't want somebody to beat them up for the lengthy password. So they're just going to use this little thing, and they're going to make it more visual. So things are changing, and I think they're changing for the better. Younger users are less responsible, right? I got a kid who's 24, and she doesn't care about much except her car. Is it clean, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at it from the flip side, who potentially would give their password away for a large sum of money? A younger person or an older person? It's usually the older person. And why? Because the older person, not retired, but say the older person, like myself, you're a director or you're a VP, you have better information to sell. So from our perspective, you can't lock down, the VP. You can't lock down, a director. So what you can do is you can set policies that differentiate what I get to when I'm on a mobile device, what I store on my mobile device, when I'm in the office, when I'm not. Will share their devices. It didn't used to happen. You wouldn't hand your laptop over to somebody. Like he's in his laptop right now, he's not handing it over to anybody. But because he's on his laptop, he may say, hey, yeah, use my phone. So somebody could look at something that you're not supposed to be looking at. We just got onboarded on HP. We were given these new letters. It sort of has a lot of confidential information on them. Do you want to share that with the world? Maybe, maybe not. The idea is that we're so giving that you have to protect, as IT people, you have to protect us against ourselves. The next thing is IT's concerns that are specific to them. The idea is, who's bringing devices to work, what type of devices, and then how do I control access for those specific devices? I get it all the time. If I let people onboard, they're going to want to onboard everything. Well, yes and no. Because as IT people, you're the ones that are designating what kind of rules that people have to live by. The idea, though, is that you automate those. You don't want to put up posters in the break rooms anymore, because that doesn't work. But if you build a policy that says salespeople can onboard 3 devices, marketing people can onboard 2 devices, and I understand that because it sort of makes its way around, that is the rule. So it's not every device. I have some customers that designate that you can only have Apple devices on a network when you onboard them versus Samsung devices, only because they've already gone and tested what an Apple device will do to the Wi-Fi infrastructure as well. So BYOD also impacts your wireless network. In the past, you'd walk up to somebody and you'd say, how many devices are on your network? Half of them don't know. So you have to go out and start profiling your networks using a tool that basically goes out and touches every device to go, oh, I see how many iPhones. I see how many Android devices. I see how many printers. If you get a help desk call and people are complaining about bandwidth issues, you can narrow it down to an area, and then you can look at it and go, oh, like in the common areas here, if you have 5,000 people connecting at lunchtime, that's a problem. You can only tell if you know what kind of devices and what kind of things they're doing with those devices. We talked about MDM and endpoint controls. Does everybody know the difference between MDM and EMM? Hands on yes. EMM, MDM. That's good, actually. So MDM was first, and MDM is basically an agent that sits on your device, and this is what you load, and this is what you have everybody download when you onboard a device through MDM tools. And the idea is that you can track usage, you can track where the devices are, you can set up cell phone minute plans to designate that I can't go over a certain amount of minutes. You can designate how many, or you can designate what type of apps, whitelisted apps that they can have on a phone, blacklisted apps. You can do jailbreak status. You can do a variety of things, but it's so centric to the phone itself that it didn't give you enough. It didn't give you enough controls as IT people. So they sort of migrated it to something called EMM, or Enterprise Mobility Management, and now that starts looking at the applications themselves. If you designate that a particular application needs to have a VPN started as soon as you open that app, you would use something like EMM. And there's this idea of a container. Does everybody understand what a container is? A container is the idea that because it's my phone, I'm going to split the phone in half. The container is the piece that I'm going to allow you to do work on. So I'm going to be able, as an IT team, designate what kind of browser you're using. I'm going to, if anybody knows something about a company called Good, they even tell you what kind of email application that you can use while in the container. So it starts separating personal from enterprise so that there's a fine line for privacy. Because what happens is that once you start putting agents on devices, the users get a little paranoid on what IT can see. IT cannot see everything, and that's one of the things that you guys need to understand. You guys can see what kind of applications people are running because they're going to initiate traffic, and your Palo Alto firewall or your other firewall can tell you what kind of applications people have. But the idea is that MDM was sort of built for the idea that these are always roaming. So when you're making a cellular connection and you're VPNing into a corporate environment, that's irregardless if you've connected to a Wi-Fi network or a wired network. Then you need something like a policy management system, which will basically do the component of, I've jumped off the cellular network and I've connected to a Wi-Fi or wired network. Now I'm going to designate whether or not I'm going to give people access. If this device is jailbroken and you've built a policy rule on the policy management system that says no jailbroken devices, that's how you stop that. If you're just using MDM and you want to keep people off of a Wi-Fi network, your option is to turn off the Wi-Fi radio on this. It's not the most elegant thing. You're thinking about BYOD, again, it's not one tool. You're going to have to look at what we call secure mobility, and you're going to have to look at multiple tools. And then there's this whole idea of traffic protection as well. So if you're doing MDM, it's a start. If you're doing the policy management component, it's better. But the policy management component gets you on the network, and typically they're out of band. So what do you need? You need, your firewalls. You need your IPS tools to look at that specific traffic as well, irregardless if it's BYOD or not. It could be an IT-issued smartphone. But you start to look at that traffic and you start looking for anomalies. If you see something that doesn't look right based on an application that you know is on a mobile device, then you have to start creating policies on your firewalls and whatnot in relation to mobile users. And you can't do anything to a mobile user if all you know is an IP address. And theoretically, what you cannot also do is you can't bounce a mobile user and their device off of a network with a firewall. You can block traffic and you can quarantine traffic, but you're not going to be able to do anything to the device. That person's still on your network. So the idea there is that BYOD and the whole protection approach is the fact that a firewall will see an anomaly and it needs to tell the policy management system something. This device that belongs to Trent is an iPhone, and I want you to bounce that user off the network. So again, now I'm looking at a third component, right? There's multiple components to BYOD. So when we talk about adaptive trust, the idea is that all these components need to work together, and you need to adapt to different scenarios. Because like I said, he travels more than I do, I'm in the office more. We have people in the office that never leave the office. They are happy to be in the office, they never work from home. Should they be given the same privileges as him? No. Should they, have the same bandwidth qualities possibly for, doing something on a laptop that's video related? Possibly not. So you need to adapt to those scenarios for business reasons, not based on the fact that, what your components can do and cannot do. They need to be more flexible. And the whole idea of adaptive trust is that at a base level, nobody gets access to your network, right? That's never good. But you have to differentiate between an executive and a staff member because you're going to hear about it if you don't. If you deny the CEO from getting onto the network, that's not good. He's going to be on your front door in 10 minutes, or his admin will, and that's probably worse. The idea is that you need to be flexible enough, and you need to take advantage of all your security infrastructure now that you're talking about BYOD. Because a firewall at the perimeter does nothing anymore for what we're talking about today. Not everybody's looking to get in through your internet access in order to create havoc. They're basically getting smarter, and they're saying he takes it with him everywhere he goes, and he walks through the front door and he connects to the corporate network. That's what I want. So this basically just puts it together and says, look, at all levels, and I'm talking about so far maybe 3, but if you look at this slide, it talks about the Wi-Fi component as well. Does anybody run Aruba Wi-Fi? A couple of smart guys. The idea there is that a long time ago, we went down this route of using role-based enforcement. So the idea is that it's not just a VLAN or an ACL. I'm going to look at who somebody's identity is. I'm going to look at the device, and I'm going to give it a role as well. Today's model for securing mobile is that I have a role, and this has a role. And what you want to do is you want to be able to use a policy management system that extends that to your Wi-Fi equipment, as well as your VPN equipment and your wired equipment. How many people are doing .1x on your wired infrastructure? A few of you. So the idea there is that in some worlds, and it was a museum the other day that came in, and they're deploying .1x on the Wi-Fi. And I said, well, what are you going to do on the wired part? They're like, oh, that's next, because it's more of a headache. Not really. Once you go down the wireless component, and you have to configure your switches for .1x anyway, as well as radius and radius COA, so that you can do a bounce on me versus a bounce on this whole room. You've already set up your wired infrastructure so that you can go in and create policies for your wired as well. So you can take roles that you created on the Wi-Fi and you can apply that to wired. You can say the enforcement's going to be different on a wired switch because it is different versus a wireless controller. But the idea is you don't want me to unplug a printer and plug in and I get the same access as the printer. That's not good. So what you want to do is, again, you want to tie it to a role for me and my devices. No matter where I plug in, you're going to say he gets access to this part of the network, not all of this part of the network. So you need to start thinking along those lines as well. How to tie a person and their device into an enforcement rule set. It doesn't take a lot, but you need to think about it beforehand. The VPN services, how many people work from home or have groups of people that just work from home? Anybody? We get it a lot when we see transcriptionists for healthcare, insurance agents. They never go to an office, they work at home. There's another component that you can use, something that Aruba sells called a remote access point. And it's basically a small AP that looks like something you'd plug into the back of your DSL line. And the idea there is that you're going to extend your SSID at the enterprise office to your home, to a small remote office, to a hotel room, something like this. And it pushes the same SSID just like you were in your office to your home. So instead of having to go and create, or open a VPN for each device, you just connect to the SSID and voila, it's a VPN back to the corporate office. You authenticate against the same policy management server. You basically get authenticated the same way. The policy management server goes to your Active Directory, makes sure that you're a real person, and voila, you're on the network. I had a hospital come in from Florida. They had a guy pretending to be a doctor and actually meeting with patients. And I don't know how he was getting on the network, but he wasn't even in the Active Directory. So they got even smarter, and they went to an application that when you as a patient walk in and you can see doctors within the hospital, you can actually see their picture, which they upload to Active Directory, then you know that it's a real doctor. But they had to do that after this guy was pretending to be a doctor for a couple of weeks in their hospital. So you guys, again, have to get more creative because the bad people are pretty creative. The last thing on this slide is SIM tools. Anybody using Splunk or ArcSight or QRadar? A couple people. Mobility means that you're going to get a lot of more information as well because people are re-authenticating a lot. Everybody knows about the University of Ohio, right? So they take a wild guess and throw a number out there. How many authentications a day because they have kids moving from class to class? Throw a number. Think big. How many? More than 2 million. More than 10. It's like 33 million authentications a day because kids are just constantly moving. BYU in Hawaii, small little campus, they were getting 300 and something thousand authentications a day with a student body of, I think it was 8,000 people. Number one, they had an old Cisco network that wasn't a controller based. So every time people moved, it was like an authentication nightmare. They've hence, fixed that. They put a controller in. But you have to plan for stuff like that as well. If you don't think about it, it's going to take your network down to nothing. And it's based on the fact that these things, again, are unpredictable. When are people going to use them? Where are they going to use them? And what they're going to do? How many people are in EDU? 1, 2, 3. We had a school in San Jose. It's a grade school. Smart kids, right? It's like one of these grade schools that you pay $50,000 a year for your kid to go to. To test Wi-Fi, they took everybody into the cafeteria and they had them use these and their iPads, and they told them to do whatever they wanted for like a minute or two. 98% of them went to YouTube. So they were basically killing the network as well. So what you want to be able to do is use a policy management system, again, to work with your Wi-Fi equipment to ensure that you're giving a quality of service to everybody based on their role. So again, you could use students versus teachers versus staff. And if you're doing it correctly, you're just using the same SSID for staff and teachers, but you're throttling their bandwidth and you're giving them a performance value that you deem correct. And then the students, you're going to do something special on because you don't want them to go to special sites and you don't want them to inundate you with YouTube traffic. But again, you don't want to create a special SSID for every instance. You want to use the power of the policy management system. So ClearPass Exchange is something that in the product that we sell, we give you an API that allows you to work with other vendors. It's built into the product. It doesn't cost you anything. But the idea is that for some of the more popular vendors like Palo Alto, MobileIron, AirWatch, Juniper, Checkpoint, we've gone out and we've tested how you can take and authenticate me coming onto the network, and then you can share my information with these other tools so that they're making a decision based on who I am, not an IP address. And they're basically they have the ability now to use it more granular, so they're not creating a policy for thousands of people, they're creating policies for groups of people. So that, again, you can adapt to how I work versus how he works. The idea at the very bottom towards the right is that the policy management system needs to work in a best-of-breed network. When I ask, a lot of people have Cisco Wi-Fi and they have Cisco wired as well, but what do you do for a policy management system? They sell something, we sell something, ours works in any environment. If you can take their solution and try to put it into our environment, it's kind of muddy. You have to buy extra components, it's not as elegant. Ours was built on the premise that it was going to work for Cisco and it was going to work for other vendors. The tool actually came from a group of people that went out and they used to work at Cisco. So it's very multi-vendor friendly. And again, the idea from BYOD is that you have to work with different firewall vendors, IPS vendors, SIM vendors. At the very bottom here, the RSA logo, multi-factor again is becoming very popular again. You're going to start seeing more and more information about two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication could be that you authorize me or authenticate me against an Active Directory, and then you authorize what I can actually get to by using a SQL database, and that's tied to my device possibly. That's two-factor. It doesn't have to be complicated. You maybe will not have to go out and buy extra equipment, but you need to think about what you're doing when you put me onto a network now. Is anybody in the government? Right? You're getting sort of pushed to the fact that you need to use multi-factor at a federal government level because of the OPM breach. So now they're saying that you must initiate two-factor auth. They use CAT cards, they use a variety of different things that we support, but it's making a comeback. So you got to think about that too. ClearPass itself is a replacement for your, is anybody running Cisco ACS? Yes. Replaces your legacy AAA. You also get profiling that's built in. There's an onboarding component, there's a guest component. If you want to have guests come on your network and just say, you know, I click this button, acceptance of use, they don't have to go through an IT person, they don't have to go through a receptionist, they do it themselves. That's part of the base, you know, appliance as well. You can deploy it so that it's remote. You can have a cluster that's built and it's local. The idea is that you can put it on our hardware or you can put it on your own hardware using a VM. There are a lot of built-in components within a policy management server. The idea is that you don't want to have to pay for everything separately, so we don't do that. We sell you a license to use the appliance. A lot of components already come built in. This idea here is what I was talking about before as well. Instead of creating separate SSIDs for BYOD, take advantage of the fact that if you buy a policy management system, you can differentiate based on who I am, what the device is, and I don't have to go to another SSID. So you make it easier for your users as well. And then this was just an example from a customer. Varian was using MobileIron as well as the ClearPass solution. The idea there is that they're coming at it from 2 points as well. Like I talked about before, BYOD, secure mobility, it cannot be just one solution anymore. It has to be multiples. And here are some examples of some larger customers, and I won't talk about them because I'm running out of time. And the idea here is that you have to think of it from two different aspects, while I'm connected to the network and when I'm not connected to the network, because BYOD stays connected everywhere. At home, at the airport, at the hotel. It's no longer just when I walk into the office. Your problems today are bigger than that. So on that, I'm done. And I hope I didn't scare you too much. But if you have 5 minutes, we'll be roaming around here. Thank you very much.